Frank had more money than the mob. Matthews was the number one. He would have ruled the United States.
He's literally fallen off the face of the earth. A lot of people looked up to Frank for probably all the wrong reasons.
In my opinion, Frank Matthews was a much larger drug dealer than Frank Lucas.
The infamous Stephanie Madamestclair, who ran numerous enterprises in Harlem in the early 20th century, St. Clair resisted the mafia. She became a local legend for her public denunciation of corrupt police and resisting the mafia's control. She ran a successful numbers game in Harlem and was an activist for the Black community. Her nicknames included Queenie, Madam Queen, Madam St. Clair, and Queen of the Policy Rackets. Stephanie St. Clair was born in the West Indies to a single mother who worked hard to send her daughter to school according to St. Clair's 1924 Declarations of Intentions. She gave Fort de France, French West Indies, as her place of birth. She immigrated to the United States from Montreal, arriving in New York in 1912. She used the long voyage and quarantine to learn English. Once arriving in Harlem, she fell in love with a small-time crook, Duke, who soon tried to prostitute her, but was shot in a fight between gangs. After 4 months, she decided to start her own business, selling controlled drugs with the help of her new boyfriend, Ed. After a few months, she had made $30,000 and told Ed she wanted to leave him and start her own business. Ed tried to strangle her, and she pushed him away with so much force that he fell and cracked his skull against the table and died. But 4 months afterwards, she employed her own men, bribed policemen, and on April the 12th, 1917, invested $10,000 of her own money in a clandestine lottery game in Harlem. As a result of her success, running one of the leading number games in the city, she became known throughout Manhattan as Queenie, but Harlem residents referred to her as Madam St. Clair. To whom it may concern, I've received letters and telephone messages from men which have annoyed me very much, and I take this occasion to ask them publicly to please not annoy me. I, Madam St. Clair, am not looking for a husband or a sweetheart. If they do not stop annoying me, I shall publish these names and letters in the newspaper. See, at this time, the number games in Harlem was male-dominated. But Madam St. Clair had the godfather of Harlem, bumpyjohnson, as her enforcer. And St. Clair was one of the only women involved. She helped the Black community in Harlem by providing many with jobs such as number runners. Part of the numbers bankers' activity was financing otherwise legitimate small businesses which took players' bets. She also helped her community by donating money to programs that promoted racial progress. Because of her success in the numbers game, she lived a lavish life, making over $20,000 per year in the 1920s. St. Clair was known to put out ads in the local newspaper educating the Harlem community about their legal rights, advocating for voting rights, and calling out police brutality against the Black community. Several times she complained to the local authorities about harassment by the police. When they paid no heed, she ran advertisements in the Harlem newspaper accusing senior police officers of corruption. The police responded by arresting her on a trumped-up charge, and she spent 8 months in jail. In response, she testified to the Selberry Commission about the kickbacks She had paid police officers and those who had participated in the Harlem numbers game. The commission fired more than a dozen police officers. Jewish and Italian-American crime families saw a decrease in profits and decided to move in on the Harlem gambling scene. Bronx-based mob boss Dutch Schultz was the first to move in, beating and killing numbers operators who would not pay him protection. But old St. Clair and her chief enforcer, Bumpy Johnson, refused to pay protection to Schultz despite the violence, intimidation by police they faced. St. Clair responded by attacking the storefronts of his businesses that ran Dutch Schultz betting operations and tipping off the police about him. This resulted in the police raiding his home, arresting more than a dozen of his employees, and seizing approximately $12 million. St. Clair never submitted to Dutch, unlike many others in Harlem. After St. Clair's struggles with Schultz, she had to become legitimate and stay away from the police, so she passed on her criminal business to Bumpy Johnson. Eventually, her former enforcer negotiated with Lucky Luciano, and Lucky took over Schultz's spot, with a percentage going to Bumpy. The Mafianos then had to go to Bumpy first if they had any problems in Harlem. Luciano realized that the war in Harlem was bad for business. Schultz was fatally wounded in a shooting ordered by the Commission. In 1935, St. Clair, though uninvolved in the hit, sent an infamous telegram to Schultz on his deathbed that read, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." The telegram reportedly made headlines across the nation. By the 1940s, Bumpy Johnson, the godfather of Harlem, had become the region's king in Harlem, and St. Clair became less and less involved in the number game. After St. Clair retired from the numbers game, she started a new era of her life as an advocate for political reform. In the late 1930s, she met her husband, Sufi Abdul Hamid, known as the Black Hitler, for his anti-Semitic Nazi fashion of activism. He was a militant activist and was the leader of an Islamic Buddhist cult. St. Clair and Hamid's marriage went downhill quickly when he allegedly had an affair with a black fortune teller known as Fufu. The marriage officially ended in January 1938 when St. Clair shot Hamid during a fight over his relationship with Fufu and was sentenced to 10 years at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York. After she was released from prison in the early 1940s, St. Clair lived a secluded life and was reported as having successful transition from underworld figures to a legitimate, prosperous businesswoman. She continued to write columns in the local newspaper about discrimination and police brutality and an illegal search and raids and other issues facing the black community. St. Clair died quietly and still wealthy in 1969. And she died a multi-millionaire. And she never was a rat.